Shields up, Iron Breakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about God of War for the PlayStation 4. Now, I'm recording this video well in advance of it being released onto YouTube, simply because I just attended an event where I got to play God of War, and I wanted to make sure that my impressions were as fresh as possible. I played the game for about 90 minutes, and I got a lot of stuff to talk about, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys understand that this video has been recorded about 13 days before being published. And I don't know at this point in time what is going to happen in those 13 days, what other information could potentially be revealed. So if I say something that is either inaccurate, just know that it was accurate at the time that I recorded the video. But anyway, having said that, now that the embargo has been lifted on this information, let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, so God of War, 90 minutes later, what do I have to say for myself? Well, starting things off, I have to say the first thing is that for some strange reason I was convinced that this particular title was going to be a typical open world game, which is clearly not the case if the demo is anything to go by. As a matter of fact, it is much more third-person, linear. It reminded me of Uncharted, or better yet, kind of like The Last of Us, where you have these branching paths in each of the levels that you kind of go through, where you can go to get additional rewards, and you can explore for treasures, a little bit of light puzzle solving here and there, but ultimately you are moving forward in between these levels, and at least during the demo there was no real reason to come back. However, I should mention that I've seen a couple of areas where it looked like, okay, there's something else to this area that I can't activate it just yet. So almost a little bit like some Metroidvania-light elements in there as well. So there might be some backtracking, but ultimately I'm not exactly sure I would consider this an open world game in the traditional sense of open world, which is like, here's this list of tasks that you can go out and do, and here's all these things on this map that you can go out and do. I don't think that is going to be the kind of game that God of War is going to end up being. And, you know, that's all the better, to be completely honest. There's way too many of those games out right now, so I'm actually glad to see them not follow that particular path and just take their own path throughout the game. As a matter of fact, the structure of the game feels reasonably similar to previous God of War entries, where it's like, look, you can go off the beaten path if you want to and find a couple of additional treasures, find a couple of things which you can use to upgrade your health gauge, or a couple of things that you can use to upgrade your rage gauge, and so on and so forth. There are some RPG-like mechanics in the form of upgrades for Kratos' axe. You can also craft him new armor pieces and even upgrade those armor pieces to become a little bit more powerful. You can do the same thing for his son, Atreus. You can craft him a new bow, you can craft him new armor pieces that make him a little bit more effective, and eventually you will also unlock special runes which will grant you access to special attacks with the usage of the axe itself. But before we get into the combat, because you guys know me, I'm all about combat, and I'm going to get really, really detailed when it comes to talking about the combat. Let's talk about the visuals in general. So in the demo that I was playing, I want to say that the game was actually running at 4K with 30 FPS. I'm not sure the kind of performance options that we might be getting for PlayStation 4 Pro, because naturally this was only a demo and they wanted to show us the better looking version of the game. I'm pretty sure that the station that I was running it on also had HDR turned on, because the visuals looked amazing. The amount of detail that they were able to put into Kratos is amazing. And the animations throughout the whole experience were just like completely mind-blowing. And you guys know me, I'm more about animation than necessary visuals, but god damn does this game deliver on a visual front. And they didn't skimp on the sound either. You can really hear every blow that Kratos lands on his foes, particularly whenever you are using your fists, because you have that option in combat. You can really hear how impactful each punch is, whether it is Kratos landing them or the enemies landing them on you. But I think one of the sounds that impressed me the most is probably the throwing of the axe. You can really hear the axe go off, like you hear like, and you also get the cool sound of whenever Kratos calls the axe back to himself. And everything that happens in between with the axe. I don't know, there's just something about that axe. Whenever you throw it against the wall, or whenever you throw it against a piece of metal, there's always a different sound that you hear. And it sounds perfectly appropriate for the scenario at hand. At least I really liked the sound as well as the visuals. I was very impressed. And in terms of music, it actually looked like it had some Norse influences as well. So that suited the game really, really well. And now that I've talked about the Norse influences in the soundtrack, I figured it's a good a time as any to talk a little bit about the story and the way that it shifts from Greek mythology into Norse mythology. Now, don't worry, we're not going to be going into spoiler territory just yet. Most of this stuff is already known, that essentially the world that Kratos is in right now is actually more Norse influenced than necessarily Greek mythology influenced. And some of you guys are going to be like, but how did Kratos get here? What is the deal? Are we going to know how all of this stuff happened? And basically the short answer to that is it is going to be revealed in the game itself. As you play more and more, they're going to be talking about Kratos' past. But what I can tell you is this is not just some guy that they've put on a Norse mythology setting and called him Kratos, okay? This is the Kratos. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I instantly noticed on the character when I started playing the game, because I'll be honest, I haven't really been watching that many trailers and that many footage, because you guys know me, I like to do a little bit of media blackout before I actually get to play the games myself. And the very first thing that I noticed when I was looking at the character model for Kratos is the fact that he's got a big-ass scar right around the stomach area, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys know where that scar comes from if you've played previous God of War games. So, this is definitely Kratos. He's got a sweet-looking beard this time around, and to be completely honest, a very cool thing that I felt throughout this demo is that Kratos doesn't really feel as invincible as he felt in previous games. Now, I'm just saying this from like the perspective of how they present the character itself. As a matter of fact, I will be developing a little bit further on this particular point later in the video, because I kind of feel that one of the things that I want to talk about in this video will bring to light a couple of spoilerishy things, so to speak, but I'm going to save that stuff towards the end to make sure that you guys can watch as many of this as you want. Without actually getting spoiled. But essentially what I mean is that one of the things that this particular presentation of Kratos reminded me of was, if you guys have seen the movie Logan, which talks about Wolverine and all of that stuff, this presentation of Kratos reminded me a lot of that, okay? He's a little bit older. He's not, he's not the old Kratos. He still has the Spartan rage within him. He's still a beast when it comes to fighting. But at the same time, you can tell that he's aged, And that is a really cool aspect to explore for that specific character, at least in my personal opinion. But naturally, this game is not just about Kratos. There's also Atreus, who is Kratos' son. He's the one who's going to be shooting the bow. He's going to be helping you out throughout the adventure, or maybe the more correct term is actually you're going to be helping him out throughout the adventure. Now, this is a very interesting aspect to God of War, because especially with Kratos' past, I don't think a lot of people would expect Kratos to eventually kind of like start a new family. And I'm really curious to explore that particular side of the story, but when it comes to gameplay, Atreus is essentially going to be helping you out solve certain puzzles. He's going to be able to reach areas that you can't reach. In a way, it reminded me a little bit from a gameplay perspective of the relationship between Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us, which is why I brought that particular example earlier in this video. But ultimately, you have a little bit more control over Atreus' actions than you had over Ellie's actions, because you will actually be able to order Atreus to shoot specific enemies with his bow, and you will also be able to ask him to do certain things while you are off puzzle solving. Now, I've mentioned puzzle solving a couple of times before. One of the very simple things that you will have to do, for instance, is every now and then you might find these chests that are locked with runes, and you will have to find these runes in the levels, and then you will have to throw your axe at them to break them, break those runes. You'll be able to open the chest. Usually these chests have some kind of element that will enable you to increase your health or increase your rage gauge, like I've mentioned in the past. Another thing that you will be able to find scattered throughout the levels are collectibles. These are, in my opinion, a little bit more reminiscent of something like Uncharted. And naturally, there are also the Metroidvania elements to take into account that I believe you'll eventually unlock special abilities that will allow you to open certain areas that will not be open from the beginning of the game. However, having said that, let's dive into combat, shall we? Let's really take a good, hard look at the combat here, which, by the way, I'm already predicting this. I'm calling this. On the 6th of March, I'm calling this. that a lot of people are going to look at this game and the first thing they're going to say is, oh, it's like Dark Souls. It's got Dark Souls combat. And good God, I'm not going to be able to stand that. Yeah, just get ready. Just get ready to hear splattered everywhere the Dark Souls of God of War, okay? But having said that, the main reason I believe people are gonna go that route is because of the way they mapped the controls. Because essentially R1 is light attack, R2 is heavy attack, and you can use L1 to block, okay? But anyway, moving past that, what does the combat feel like? So it's actually a very interesting system that they got going here, because usually enemies will have something which is called a stun gauge. I'm not exactly sure what they call it in game, but essentially there's a gauge below their health which fills up as you begin to stun them. Now, if you use the axe to actually attack them, that gauge will not fill up because you will be doing direct damage onto their health pool. However, you can unequip the axe and just manually punch them repeatedly, and that is going to fill up their stun gauge a lot quicker. You guys might be wondering, so what is the advantage to using the axe versus using these punches that will fill up their stun gauge? Well, you can perform finishing moves if you actually fill up that stun gauge on the enemies, and this brings up a whole bunch of options. The other thing is you can also order Atreus to shoot them with arrows, and arrows also fill up the stun gauge. Whereas again, if you hit them with the axe, it's going to deal way more damage, but it is not going to stun them. So the advantage of stunning them is that you will eventually be able to perform finishing hits if you are able to fill up that gauge completely. Now, this depends on which enemy you are finishing off. Certain enemies, when you finish them off, you will be able to do like a ring of fire. Other enemies, you will be able to do like a ring of frost. And these types of things will naturally affect all of the enemies that are in the area. So you'll be able to choose between, okay, I need to dispatch this guy quickly. This guy I can kill with a finisher. So that will trigger like a ring of fire, which is going to burn all of these other guys that will all start taking damage. And you can kind of set up a strategy that way. You can also throw your axe at any point, and you can call it back. And the cool thing about throwing your axe is that when you call it back, if it goes through enemies, it deals damage through those enemies as well. So it really brings a bit of a strategic element to it. And on top of it, it also feels really cool to like just throw your axe onto an enemy. The axe actually stays stuck in there. And then you can run up to the enemy and start punching him, then call back your axe, and then attack them with the axe again, then throw your axe again at somebody else. You know, there's a lot of back and forth with this kind of axe play that you can do that feels really good. Now, if you guys remember, you guys know that I was pretty excited about using the shield to shield bash people, and essentially the shield is a part of your unarmed combo. So I told you that you could fisticuffs your enemies if you unequip the axe. A part of the combo of smashing your enemies in the face is going to be shield slamming them using the shield. And it feels very satisfying, but I really, really wanted the shield to be its own weapon, but hey, what the hell. At least I get cool shield slams every now and then whenever I'm not using my weapons, which probably means that I'm going to be playing through most of the game not using my weapons. Now, once again, on the topic of the axe, beyond being able to throw it, your axe can also perform certain special attacks that you will unblock as you play through the game. So I only unblocked two very basic ones. One of those is like an AoE stun that you can do using the axe, and the other one is this leaping attack that Kratos can use that I don't actually think I got to use that because I killed the last enemy at the end of the demo when they unlocked that attack. So I only got to see it because I used it once before the demo was over. But it was a cool little attack. Kratos jumps in the air and smashes the axe into the ground. And I'm sure that's going to deal AoE and frost damage, and it's going to be pretty cool, but I wasn't really able to use it, so there you go. Now, the diverse type of enemies that I fought Draugrs, which are essentially Norse mythology undead. I also fought a couple of trolls, as well as some Norsemen and revenants. Now, the cool thing about this was that when it came to the Draugrs, there were very different types of Draugrs, so you would have to switch up your approach a little bit depending on which one you're fighting. Some of them would be a lot tougher than others, and they demanding that you actually dodge instead of just blocking everything. And by the way, even though you can block, if you press block at the exact right time, you're also able to do kind of like a parry move. Although I wasn't really able to truly capitalize on that particular parry, it just kind of sent the enemies reeling back. So I think it's more used as an opener for you to get some space, or maybe further down into the game you get access to some special attack that you can perform after you do a parry, or maybe the parry will fill up your runic energy, which will enable you to do the special attacks more often. Again, not entirely sure what the deal is going to be with that, but either way, it is an interesting mechanic there. But yeah, depending on the Draugr types, some of them you will want to dodge, others you will want to block, others you will want to just basically stun in order to get the special AoE effect that they provide. Others you will want to slash down with the axe. Some of them will even be out of your range, demanding that you actually use the throwing of the axe or ask Atreus to shoot them from a distance. That's the other thing. Atreus every now and then can also be caught in the middle of the fight, forcing you to go and free him. It doesn't happen too often. As a matter of fact, throughout my whole time with the demo, I've only seen that happen once, and it was because there were just so many Draugrs on screen that I guess one of them caught him. And once that particular Draugr caught him, I got a clear indication. They're like, look, you better save Atreus or that Draugr's going to kill him. So I went in and just smacked them. Actually, I threw my axe at him, I think, from a distance, and it just instantly released Atreus, and I could continue using Atreus's arrows instantly. So I figured that was not a big deal. Now, when it came to trolls, those are the big enemies that you guys might have seen in the trailers, the ones with the big rocks that they slam those on the ground and stuff. Those felt considerably more threatening, particularly because they have wide attacks, and it was not as easy to dodge them. At least, again, it was my first time playing the game, so maybe with a little bit of practice I could do it a little bit better. And I don't think that I was fighting them correctly. I got this feeling that they probably have some kind of a weak spot that I wasn't able to figure out in the time that I was playing. But ultimately, by the time that I, dwindled their health down enough, you're going to get to a point where you just press R3 for a finisher move on the Draugr. And I was hoping for maybe a little bit more input that would allow me to control a little bit better how the takedown was going to be performed. But nope, it's just straight up finisher takedown. That is predetermined. You press R3 and boom, Kratos goes, does his thing. Knee to the face, axe to the forehead, pull the head up, then slam the rock on top of the dude. It was crazy. Like, really over-the-top animation, super gory, the kind of stuff that we kind of expect from God of War. And in case you guys are wondering, is it as violent as the previous games? I would say, and then some, on some aspects. So it's good to see that they haven't really lost their touch there. Now, when it came to the Norsemen, they definitely felt different than anything else that I fought. But I don't want to get into too many details about the Norsemen because I feel like that might reveal some story details that I really don't want to throw at you just yet. And then when it came to the Revenants, now these were actually a type of enemy that required a very different approach. I actually had to tell Atreus to shoot arrows at them, and only after Atreus was able to stagger them, then I would be able to go over there and smack them in the face. Now, the cool thing about the finishing moves that I told you guys before is that they aren't always just like straight up finishers, like fatality style moves. So certain enemies, you'll be able to grab them and then run with them and then throw them against the wall or something, or use them as a shield as you ram them into other enemies, that kind of stuff. Whereas other enemies, you'll actually be able to grab them by the neck and start punching them repeatedly, which is so satisfying. Okay, it is just so nice to do that stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much most of the combat stuff beyond Spartan Rage. So there are two main gauges that I had to keep track of. One of those was the health gauge for Kratos as I was going through these fights. The other one was the rage gauge. Now, when the rage gauge fills up, once again, you press R3 and L3, and you are going to go into Spartan Rage. Now, when you are in Spartan Rage, I don't believe you can actually use your weapon. Essentially, Kratos just goes balls out, punches everything down. Stuff just starts exploding. You can do like a leaping attack that does AoE damage. But at the start of the game, at least, Spartan Rage lasts very little time. So it's just like, it's a couple of hits, boom, you're done, okay? But yeah, Spartan Rage is in there, and also pretty damn satisfying, if you ask me. So this is pretty much most of the stuff that I can tell you about the combat of the game. It felt pretty solid, felt a lot of fun, but I have to play it like a whole bunch more hours to ensure that it doesn't just become repetitive, because it was a little bit repetitive for the enemies that I fought, because like once I figured out, okay, this enemy does this enemy does that, this is how I deal with this enemy, this is how I deal with this specific enemy. Sure, there's different options that you have and different ways in which you can choose to tackle each of them, but naturally there's always going to be a bit of an optimal way to deal with each of the enemies, and I hope that the variation from the enemies, as well as the upgrades that I eventually get in the axe and the upgrades that I'll be able to get on the bow, I hope those kind of like give me a little bit more diversity in playstyle, so that, you know, player B doesn't always play the same way as player A, because that's the most efficient way of dispatching enemies. You know what I'm saying? I'm just hoping there's variety in the way that you can tackle each of these challenges, and I believe there will be, but again, I cannot confirm nor deny that, because the demo, you know, you had very limited things that you could do in the demo, so there you go. And at this point, I want to start talking about one specific fight that happened in that demo, because that fight was friggin' amazing. But I also consider that particular fight to be somewhat spoilery, because I'm going to be talking in detail about the enemy, and I kind of feel that that enemy is a very important character in the actual game itself. So if you want to avoid spoilers at all costs, this is your warning. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and you should probably leave now. And if you haven't left by now, I'm just going to assume that you don't care, so I'm going to give it to you straight. So there is a character that you fight in that demo that I thought was amazing. So it reminded me a little bit of Ian McGregor in a way, which I think might have been their inspiration. But the cool thing is that, you know, Kratos is this big, imposing figure, right? He's a big friggin' god of war, just like muscle-bound dude. And then this other guy, he's like a Norseman, but he's way smaller than Kratos. And, you know, sure, he's ripped and stuff, but he's not super impressively built, you know? And he goes up to Kratos, and he basically picks a fight with him. Just straight up picks a fight with Kratos at the door of Kratos' home, okay? And Kratos is like, oh, I don't want to fight you. And he punches Kratos, and Kratos is like, whatever. He keeps punching Kratos, and then eventually Kratos punches back, and he's like, ah, now we're talking. This dude is just like covered in tattoos. He's got a beard. He looks like very typical Norseman, right? And then after Kratos punches him, he gets up and is like, okay, now it's my turn. He punches Kratos and sends him flying, okay? So we're talking like superhuman demigod level strength here. And then you go on this fight against this complete stranger, and it is an amazing fight from a visual standpoint, from an animation standpoint. I mean, mechanically, I gotta be honest, I kind of, once I started reading his tells, it became like pretty obvious, okay, he's going to do that attack now, I need to dodge here. He's going to do that thing now, I need to dodge there. He's going to do this thing now, I need to block. So, you know, mechanically it didn't feel like this super intensive fight, but visually, god damn, it was amazing. Like just throwing this dude around like a rag doll, and then him throwing you around like a rag doll, and just like these two dudes, it's almost like Superman fighting Superman. And it felt great. The whole fight felt amazing, even though, like I said, from a mechanical standpoint, not too demanding. But whenever you started going at each other, and then you get those cutscenes in between, it felt so good. And some of the animations during that fight, you can see that that dude just doesn't give a fuck. And I don't know, that specific fight felt really good. And you guys are wondering, so why would I consider that to be a spoiler? Well, for one, usually Kratos fights gods. He doesn't really fight these, you know, human-sized opponents that he doesn't know. It's like you see Kratos fighting Poseidon. You see Kratos fighting Zeus and all the other Greek gods. And you have this dude just came out of nowhere. He says Odin sent him, and he's just beating the crap out of Kratos. He also has some kind of a healing factor because he can regenerate himself. And you guys remember that earlier in the video I said that Kratos feels older. He doesn't feel invincible anymore. And by the time Kratos is done with this fight, you can tell that that fight took a toll on him. Like, sure, he's still got his demigod powers and all this other stuff, but you can see that Kratos is like, damn, that hurt, you know? And it gives this mortality to Kratos almost that you don't really experience as often in, I mean, I say the previous titles, even though the title that I've played the most was God of War 3 and God of War Ascension. And in those games, Kratos almost feels like this invincible dude. right? Throughout most of those fights, Kratos is just beating the crap out of everything and everyone. There's no fucks given. Whereas in here, the very first fight that kind of pushes him to the limit with this stranger, he's really like he's worn down, and there's blood splattered all over him, and it's just pretty cool. It was my favorite fight in that specific demo, but mostly because of the really cool shots and the cutscenes and the animations that take place in between. It just felt really cool. But again, I wish mechanically there was more to it. Then again, I only played in normal difficulty because I didn't know if they were going to play me. They were going to allow me to play the whole demo. I didn't know what the deal was going to be with that, so I was like, okay, I want to make sure that I don't get stuck on a fight. I want to make sure that I see as much of the content as possible. But to be completely honest, I'm probably going to be playing either 1 difficulty above normal or 2 difficulties above normal. But 2 difficulties, man. I remember when I was playing God of War Ascension, it was not kind to me when I tried playing it in maximum difficulty, so I don't know. I kind of want to, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. We'll see. But anyway, that's pretty much all I had to tell you guys about my experience with God of War. Let me know what you guys thought about it. Let me know if you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Wow, that was something, that fight.